Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Florencia Becher, the director of the Interior Design Program, and I want to welcome you all to the New York Institute of Technology, School of Architecture and Design. And this is a Future of Design lecture series. This series delves into many current topics, such as AI, smart materials, climate change, and mainly bringing to the table the crucial role of designers play in shaping the future. As part of this lecture series, I want to thank the notable presenters today here that will be soon introduced, but whose expertise and insights are invaluable. And we are truly honored to have you here with us on this Writing Futures Interiors Symposium. I extend my gratitude to our esteemed host, Dean Maria Pervelini, and the Lectures and Event Committee for their support in highlighting the theoretical and innovative dimensions of interior design in this symposium. Additional special thanks to Professor Francesca Forlini for her leading in this first, in many years, Interior Design Symposium here at NYIT School of Architectural Design. Thank you all for being here in person and online. And I'll leave Francesca now do the introduction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Florencia, for these wonderful words today. I'm very excited to introduce our speakers today. We start with Alexa Griffith-Winton. She is a design historian and educator. She's manager of public programs and interpretation at Cooper Hewitt. And she has researched and published the work of Dorothy Leibs for over 10 years. But she's published scholarly and popular publications for decades, I might say. And some of these journals and publications are the Journal of Design History, Dwell, the Journal of the Archives of American Art, and Modern Crafts. She co-edited a series of books such as A Dark Light, A Light, A Bright, The Design of Dorothy Leibs, recently published, if I'm not wrong, with Susan Brown. She also received research grants from the Graham Foundation, the New York State Council for the Arts, the Center of Crafts, Creativity and Research, Nordic Culture Point, and the Beverly Willis Architecture Foundation. She will speak about her multiple publications today. She will share her knowledge and also her reflections on the theory of interior design, I suspect, as she has claimed in her writing and publications that interior design is actually post-disciplinary. Since it evades the confines and boundaries of scholarly categories. And that has definitely potential both for research and practice. So I look forward to her presentation for sure, as I look forward to the presentation of Annie Kogan. She is a designer, educator, and the principal at Chairs Plus Building Studio, a multi-scale design studio based in Brooklyn with Caleb Crawford. She's a full-time associate professor at Pratt Institute School of Design, and her practice involves textile, furniture, and drawings to create a haptic research agenda. She has been awarded the Fields of Future Fellowship at the Bard Graduate Center recently in the spring of 2023. She's a Winter Her Museum Creator Maker Fellowship for 2018-2019, an artist in residence. She held an artist in residence position at Bois Bouquet, Domain Bois Bouquet in France in 2021. And she has published public space books and the Book of Errors, which she will speak more about today. Pretty interesting publication. So we look forward to seeing that today. It's a book of illustrated essays looking at the complicated preservation of 3 American historic houses through drawings and ephemera. She received her BA from Bennington College of Vermouth and Master of Architecture at SciArc in Los Angeles. And she's working on a new publication as far as I understand, so we will hear a little bit more about that today. Our third speaker is Deborah Schneiderman. She is a professor of interior design at Pratt Institute and a principal founder at Desk, Architecture, Design, and Research. Schneiderman's scholarship and practice explore the emerging fabricated interior environment and its materiality. She has published extensively. Some of her publications include the books Inside Prefab, The Ready-Made Interior, The Prefab Bathroom, Textile, Technology and Design from Interior Space to Outer Space, Interiors Beyond Architecture, Interior Provocations, which is a series on the history, interior, and practice of interior design, and also autonomous interiors, appropriated interiors, interiors on edge. So she has also published her research in various chapters of books and magazines and journals, and has exhibited her work and lectured internationally in various conferences, venues, and events, including the Storefront for Art and Architecture, the Center for Architecture, the Van Allen Institute in books. So she earned her bachelor degree in design and environmental analysis from Cornell University and an MArch from Southern California Institute of Architecture. Her talk will address the importance of scholarship and pedagogy in the topic of alternative interior environments, focusing on prefabricated interiors, but she will also speak more extensively about her incredible publications. So we look forward to today's conversation, and please help me welcome our first speaker, Alexa Griffith-Winton.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm so excited to be here tonight with my colleagues and friends and partners in crime and talking about interiors. And what I'm going to be talking about today is some experiences that I have had trying to research interiors and trying to justify researching interiors, and some theoretical propositions for understanding or thinking about interiors as you encounter them. And most of the images that I'm going to be showing are conceptual images of interiors. So artists' representation of interiors are staged in some other way. And that's very deliberate because of the strong symbolism that is contained in every single interior image. So we'll be looking at a range of different disciplines. And but before we get there, I'll start with a very short origin story, which is I did my master's at Bard Graduate Center in the late 1990s. And there I had determined that I was really passionate about the interior, and that was what I was going to write my thesis on. And I was really shocked and surprised when my master's advisor told me that interiors were not it was not a discipline and you could not do a master's thesis on it. And that made no sense to me. And so I'm one of these annoying people that if you tell me something is impossible, then I become obsessed with it. And so that is what I did. And here I am still. And so I'm just pointing this out to say that the study of the interior has come so far in the past 25 years. It is changing all the time. There's so many really exciting people who are challenging the idea of disciplinarity, which was the thing that was making my advisor, rightly at that time, tell me that there was no discipline for the history of the interior was not a discipline. But it is a really exciting field and exciting site of inquiry, especially if you kind of embrace the multi or post-disciplinarity of it and realize that you can really pick and draw from all of these different disciplines. And then the other thing that has really shaped my thinking about the interior is this research on Dorothy Liebes, who was a textile designer who was extremely well known in the mid-century. And then almost as soon as she died in the early 1970s, her memory disappeared. And yet, when you look at the images of the interiors that she worked on, the scale of the textiles is at the scale of the architecture. In her time, she was constantly credited in whatever magazines, newspapers she was appearing in. And so I was really interested in thinking about that and thinking about how, if you go to the primary sources, if you go to the House of Beautifuls and the House and Gardens and architecture trade magazines and so on, she's everywhere. But then if you go to the next secondary research, design history, her name is gone, and most collaborators on a given architectural project are also gone. And so that's a challenge for the researcher in how to recover these stories. But again, it's also an opportunity because there's so much research left to do. This is the Persian room, which had programmable lights in the textiles themselves that could be instructed to display fountains or stars or whatever. And again, the scale of these, they were 20 feet high. Each window bay was 10 feet wide. They are architectural scale textiles. And then this is another one where there's a set of movable partitions in the United Nations Delegates Dining Room that can actually shape the interior. It's an open plan interior, and these screens can be collapsed or unfurled, creating rooms within rooms without the kind of feeling of separation that actual floor-to-ceiling screens would provide. So what is interior theory? Why do we study it? For me, again, it was that kind of that thrill of having all of these different disciplines come together. You have objects, you have space, you have textiles, you have materiality. All of these things are relevant, and how you shape that story is a great. It's one of the most interesting parts for me of researching interiors. And I think that is, again, getting back to like why some people have in the past been resistant to it as a field, because it's constantly shifting. It's constantly changing. People are moving, tiny objects are coming in and out, big changes are happening, and it's in a constant state of flux, which poses another challenge for research, but also an opportunity. So I wanted to look at some examples of interior-ish projects that speak to interiority in really interesting ways, but also reflect on this kind of hybrid or post-disciplinary nature of interiors. And this is a project that we all have talked about for many years. The fashion designer Hussein Chalayan had a fashion show in the early 2000s, where he was thinking about migration and rootlessness and what happens when you are between homes. And so for this, he proposed clothing that turned into furniture and furniture that turned back into clothing. And so even though there was no spatial envelope to confine this experience, the models themselves and these objects were really speaking to that connection between the body and furniture and what makes us comfortable, why we get attached to certain things in our homes, certain ways that we arrange our furniture and so on. And to think about what that might mean if all of that was taken away and we were in a state of flux, like the proposition in this fashion show. Other fashion designers are constantly kind of probing these boundaries as well in really interesting ways that are, proposing clothing as a kind of interior. And the orange jacket here is Final Home, which was an Issey Miyake project in the 1990s that was really kind of proposing some very extreme garments for extreme conditions. And this particular one was meant to be a kind of a coat that you can put everything in. You can stuff it with newspapers if you need insulation. It was meant also to speak to this idea in the late 1990s, at the end of the 20th century, about movement and this kind of idea of being rootless or being able to kind of take yourself from anywhere to anywhere. And then this wonderful Tom Brown, I don't know, it's like a jumpsuit or some sort of, it's very spatial in the way that is creating a boundary between the body inside and everything else around it, and proposing a kind of interiority through fashion that I think is really, really interesting. And I think something that I think there's much research left to be done on this. And you see more and more fashion designers exploring these or kind of pushing these boundaries between clothing and interior in recent years. Another project that I think really speaks to how rich and sort of complex and contradictory interiors can be, is the Cornelia Parker installation on the roof of the Met in 2016. This was a project called Transitional Object Psycho Barn. And in it, Parker, who's a British artist, decided to kind of merge these classic American typologies of the red barn and the house from the Alfred Hitchcock horror movie Psycho. And so she's conflating it, and from certain angles, this house looks very cozy and sort of agrarian in that 19th century pastiche of the US. From other angles, it looks very off kilter, like it's gonna fall, like the house from Psycho. And then from this angle, you can see it's not a house at all. And so that kind of all of those questions of interiority and belonging and are implied in this work, and I think highlighted in really interesting ways. And then artificial intelligence is really, I think, an interesting thing for us to think about. It's not going anywhere, so we need to think about how do we deal with it, how do we frame it. But in the realm of interiors, I think interiors have always been a site of fantasy, and we all have this kind of these proposals for interiors or idealized interiors in our minds. Sometimes we read about them in books. And artificial intelligence offers us the opportunity to kind of like push those boundaries and see the impossible in a very believable way. So again, I find this a really interesting theoretical proposition that needs a lot more unpacking. This is one of my favorite quotes by the British artist Richard Hamilton. "Any interior is a set of anachronisms, a museum with the lingering residues of decorative styles that an inhabited space collects. Banal or beautiful, exquisite or sordid, each says a lot about its owner and about something about humanity in general." And this is exactly, in a quote, why I am so interested in interiors. And so I wanted to kind of look at some of these conceptualizations of the museum interior or the staged interior. And this one is by Hamilton himself. This is for an exhibition in 1958. The installation is called Home for a Collector of Brutalist and Tachist Art. Hamilton was somebody who was very keenly interested in contemporary culture, pop culture. And in this project, he is both creating and presenting this very modern, extremely stylized and elegant interior for an art collector, but also sort of pointing up, critiquing some of these aspects of this architecture, like the large picture window, the car outside, the carefully ordered objects in this island here, and the abstract art on the walls. So Hamilton was an artist who returned again and again to the interior. And this is an interesting example for me because instead of working this out in painting form, which he also did, it's an installation for an exposition. This kind of project is so interesting to me. It is from a series of inflatable furniture that was designed by the Vietnamese-French interior designer by the name of Khazir Khan. And he was working in Paris in the late 1960s, and he was very, very interested in these translucent inflatable interiors. And so there was furniture, like we see Catherine Deneuve in this chair to the right of Khazir Khan's interior. But I think it's something else when you have an entire interior that is inflated and transparent. And so he's creating or signaling that this has a domestic possibilities. He's sitting there with his family. But then you think about the material, and plastic is this kind of endlessly transforming material. It's constantly, it's never going to be dissolved back into the earth, but it's also never going to go away. It's going to just degrade over time, but never be recycled. But at this time, it was also something that signaled opportunity for transformation in a really radical sense. But images are, can be deceiving. And I think it's really interesting when you're doing your research to look for all different kinds of images. And if you see this one from the outside of Khazir Khan's proposed pneumatic interior, it looks much more a little disappointing, or at least to me. You see where the tape and the sort of where the real problems are, rather than these idealized images. So I think it's really important to, cast a really wide net when you're doing this researching, and always remember that any photograph of an interior is itself a mediated image and is not to be taken as a literal representation. Film, it's constantly kind of critiquing aspects of interiors. And this is from a film that is a favorite of many people who are interested in architecture and interiors, the French director Jacques Tati's Playtime. And here he's kind of sending up our obsession with ever larger panes of glass and the kind of changes and shifts in privacy that are enforced by this architecture. And then another one of my really most favorite theoretical propositions through film set is 2001: Space Odyssey. That's really wild living room interior with these French furniture strewn around the room. And instead of a luminous ceiling, we have a luminous floor. And given that this movie is set in outer space and there's no gravity, of course, they're playing with this idea of you have no floor, you have no ceiling. And the presence of these antiques, at least to my mind, makes it look even more sort of eerie and unhomely. And it reminded me, I don't know how many of you have maybe been to see the Frick when it is in the Marcel Breuer building, but I loved that installation. I thought it was really thrilling to see their collection there, but there was something about it that was very kind of scenographic and very Kubrick to me in the juxtaposition of the brutalist architecture and the collection. Objects are very important, and a lot of philosophers and writers and critics have interrogated objects and our relationship to them. People like the French novelist and philosopher Georges Perec, who chose to really express these ideas in his fiction, where he really interrogated space and how we occupy it. And so he would sit and just analyze the way that he moved through his apartment, the way that he used his teaspoons, and did a really meticulous catalog of these things. And the purpose was not to make a kind of a spatial program. It was to really teach himself about how he's occupying that space and to think about what that means in a philosophical sense. And he wrote a novel along the same lines, where he invented an entire apartment building and created this incredible matrix, which is all about the spaces in this apartment building. And that actually really defined the plot of the novel. So Perec is somebody who is really inhabiting this idea of interiority and expressing it in his work, but from a very different lens from an interior designer. And I think one that is really interesting. And then this is more straight up design example of this kind of analytical approach. Georgia Lupi, who's a wonderful data designer. I don't know, you may have seen, she did a long data visualization in the New York Times about COVID, living with long COVID recently. But this is an example from her project Dear Data, where she is documenting all the times when she had privacy over the course of a week. So for me, the interior is very much implied in this example as well. And then we get to the inhabitants and how we inhabit interior space and what we think about that, what that means. And going back to photography, especially with modern architecture, I would say the photography is always really deliberate. It's often staged. And, I, for one, grew up with images of the architecture of somebody like Le Corbusier and only looking at black and white images, so not knowing that they were actually very polychrome. So again, I encourage you to kind of challenge yourself to find lots of different images, lots of different types of images. And the ones I have here are maybe images of important interior designers in poses or depicted in a way that you wouldn't imagine them. So Elsie DeWolf, the wonderful interior designer from the early 20th century, was really into fitness. And she's often seen in her diamonds in her purse, but here she is doing her daily fitness routine. And then Eileen Gray, the wonderful Irish architect who worked in France. And her final apartment was in an 18th century French apartment building. And you see her looking very much like a woman of 80 in her fashion and so on, but seated in this very modern furniture of her own design in this 18th century apartment. Again, so just, be voracious in your research. Another Jacques Tati image. Again, think about how film is pointing out things to us about our interior spaces. And this particular one was another critique of modernism, but it was also kind of a love story to it as well. And then recent projects that I would love to, if I revisit any of my publications on the theory of the interior, would incorporate into my research things like the front room, looking at the really particular ways in British interior design that immigrant front rooms become really central parts of not only the home, but expressing that identity. And then I don't know how many of you may have seen the Afrofuturist period room at the Metropolitan Museum. It's a really, I think, a really thrilling example because it challenges in so many ways the period rooms. It's installed in the period room, European period room wing of the Met. And so you're really in dialogue with these interiors from across Europe that are just as fictional and just as staged as the Afrofuturist period room. And I think it's a really thrilling juxtaposition. And I'm have revisited that project many times and will continue to do so. And then there's really these days with the internet, Instagram, there's so many interesting projects that are being worked out in social media. And a series of rooms is just one of them. It's a research project that is run by an interior designer from Vienna. And it's just a constant thinking through of these different visualizations of the interior that is really always making me think in different ways about the interior. I highly recommend following it. But I think that's a really interesting way to share information and think things, again, see things that you wouldn't see elsewhere or otherwise in the context of these sort of crowdsourced resources. And then to think about, and I work in a museum now, I work at Cooper Hewitt, and I think, you know, when we think of interiors, often they're considered acquisitions, they're considered objects, like the Adam Room at the Met or any of those period rooms are objects, and they're in their collection as an object. But spaces are social spaces, right? Interior space is social space, and without people, it isn't an interior space in the way that we think about it. So there are some examples of interior spaces being acquired for museums now that I think are really worth considering. And the best example is Robert and Alison Smithson's Robin Hood Gardens was this wonderful social housing project outside of London, in East London, that was torn down in the last 10 years. And there was a really vibrant and passionate community of residents in Robin Hood Gardens that really did not want it to be torn down. There were many preservationists that really demanded that it not be torn down. It was torn down nonetheless. The Victoria and Albert Museum acquired a section of one of the floors that includes open public, covered public space and 2 apartments. And in speaking to one of their interpretation people recently, she was telling me that they are not going to be exhibiting this as an object. They are going to be exhibiting it as a social space, a place of inquiry and social engagement. They're in touch with the people who lived in these units and their neighbors, and they're documenting the history, and they hope to have these people continue to feel that this is their home, even though now it is, you know, in part of the Victoria and Albert Museum. And I think this is a really interesting and important consideration for how we think about these historic period rooms and what we're doing when we are collecting them and what they mean and what we project onto them versus what they were. So I thought that that was a really exciting paradigm for considering historic interiors from a new perspective in the context of museums. And, you know, artists were invited to respond to the Robin Hood Gardens project as well. And on top of this is a film still from Do Ho Soo, did a whole film about residents of Robin Hood Gardens and their reflections. And this was exhibited at the Venice Biennale in 2017. So, you know, I used to try really hard to be encyclopedic in my research, and then I realized that you can't be. This particular subject, I think you have to be rigorous, but you also have to lean into your intuition. So for me, it's novels, it's films, it's artist representations of the interior that are feeding my thinking. But you know, you will all have your own sort of passions, and don't feel like you have to be, you don't have to fold everything into it. You can't It's much too large. So be happy and be, really explore the contours of what your passion for interiors is in a kind of a rigorous framework. So with that, thank you.
Yeah. We'll go all the way up to the top from the beginning. Yeah, there we are. Oh, this is hard because now I want to talk about Alexis. Okay, so it's so nice to be here. It's great to have to be with students. And what I'm going to do today is kind of tell you about what's on my desk. Okay. I've got 3 projects. One I finished, but it still comes up because projects do that. They come up. And then I've got 2 that I'm super nervous about. And you guys can help me and give me some feedback. But the title is How Books Are Built, maybe, if I decide that's what I want to do. We'll talk. All right. So I'm going to talk about the book that I did make. This was published in 2021 by a small literary press called The Public Space. And the editor of this press is a really dear friend. I'm really lucky that the work that I do is always supported by a great New York creative community. Remember, you live in New York and we're the most creative people. The next thing I'm going to talk about is a book I'm making, which I'm really nervous about. And if you're working on writing projects, you're always like, oh, I got to go work. I got to go work. The next is a book I will make. It's the book I really want to make. I got to get the middle and done in order to get to the next book. Okay, so that's where I'm at. So the book that I did make is a very small book. It's only 64 pages. And ironically, it is a book that was devised, even though the name of the seminar is Writing. It's a book that was devised because writing is so bloody painful for me. I can't even tell you. I've cried in front of Deborah about writing. So I have really worked on, I call it haptic research, and that's a way to make things in order for it to be your research about interiors. And I fully support you if you might have problems like that. And that's the thing about interiors that's really, really amazing. You can be a person that writes, you can be a person that makes, you can be a person that has exquisite taste, you can be a person that has bad taste, and you can still do very well. Right? So I think that my career is a real example of how to make what you love work for you. So this book was built out of, I secretly love historic houses more than anything in the world, and I had to figure out a way to make that part of my life. So I started writing about it because that's how you get more mileage. And then I wrote some more and found some more incredible interiors. And then I made a class at Pratt about it, where we actually look at historic interiors and we put them into AI environments or AI or augmented reality, and we make speculative spaces. So we kind of design on top of historic spaces. And then now this research is morphing into an idea about historic buildings and kind of the genesis of the Book of Errors. What is a book about historic houses about errors? Are these historic places telling us the truth? There's something kind of funny about going to historic houses or period rooms at the Met. Like, how truthful are they? And I'm finding that one of the things that we really have to look at in historic space is that in America, the African American community is not represented. And the very weird part is that African Americans built many of our historic houses, not just like built like out of bricks. They wove the fabric they made. And I'm working with Jessica Caldwell, who's a colleague at Pratt, and I'll do that lecture in 2 weeks. But this small book got worked and worked and worked and redrawn and redrawn. And one of the things that kind of made this series of drawings was every single historic house person or curator doesn't necessarily want to show you the representation of a historic house. They want to create an atmosphere. So that put me in to a frame of mind that drawings create atmosphere. And that's what I was going for. A lot of times a drawing in and of itself wasn't enough, so I had to make a model. And that's how the Book of Errors came about. So the next book is the book I'm making. I'm very tense about it, so be nice to me. All right, this book is a book, called Soft Construction. It's something I've been working on kind of in my life for about 15 years, maybe. And it's an idea about the practice of textiles in the interior. And what I'm putting forward is saying I'm an advocate for textiles in the interior, that the interior isn't all drywall and concrete and steel, that soft construction is probably about at least 40% of any interior. I mean, look at this room. Soft. Right? So I am, this is my mission to put forward that soft construction is just as important as any in any interior. This started with to a certain extent, I mean, my chronological thing is a little messed up, but Deborah and I did a project together where we made performative curtains. We wanted curtains and drapery that had more of a responsibility, like it had to have lights in it, it had to be a shelf, it had to block drafts. We gave it lots of jobs to do. We wrote a lot about it. I got very interested in smocking and embroidery and making large scale architectural embroidery. And smocking as a way to make space. Then at Pratt, we were able to do lots and lots of testing and interiors work with soft construction with some sort of basic like folding and embroidery techniques. And we also did a lot of spaces with the knitting machines that are available there. So that sort of brought about this idea of that soft construction is a thing. So basically that's kind of the point of this book. These are some we're at the stage or this super fun stage where we're counting images and they're trying to figure out how expensive the book's gonna be. So we're doing mock-ups to kind of see who these people were. And this will be a collection of like the coolest soft construction in the world. That's my goal. Okay, so it's not just going to be curtains, it's going to be cool curtains. And I really want you guys to buy the book, please. It's not having to buy when it's available, and then get ideas and then make soft construction a thing. but these are some really amazing people, and we're going to do specifications. So this chart over here is we're going to ask Adam, what type of fabric did you use? What type of digital printing did you use? What type of thread did you use? And that's going to be really exciting because we're going to get all these secrets from these really great designers. And you guys know how many have looked. Instagram, get on him. That's good. Right. And this is the book I will make. I don't know why that change, but we'll move on. I am obsessed with this man called Robert Van Waring, right? He is a 18th century furniture maker who was not really good. He didn't draw really well. He never really built anything. He kind of only made, so I feel sorry for him, and I want to kind of bring him forward to the world. So the first thing I did is I drew every single chair he designed. And I did those in watercolors, and those were at interior provocations in a publication. Then I got a fellowship to study more of his books. He only designed, all he did was create 4 books, and then we can't find it. He's like disappearing. So he's done these 4 books of furniture, and then he's gone. So I drew at Bard, which is up the street, 86th Street. I drew every single piece of furniture in this second book. It's the first book, second. And then I wrote about it. Sometimes you just got to write about it. I thought I was doing good just drawing this project. And then I did an exhibition, and I'll be speaking about it again next week. So these are all sort of how a book gets made. You talk about it, you make things, you put it on a wall, you draw in your notebook, and that's how all this information and scholarship and research gets put forward. What's happened is, and this is the good part of doing all this work, is I can very clearly see how this book will happen. It'll have 3 parts. The first part is going to be sort of maybe a mystery story. We need to kind of find who this guy is. We don't even know if he's a guy. We don't know what he looks like. We don't know how old he is. There's still so much research to find. So I want to write about that, finding Van Waring. And then I've done a lot of work where I've done drawings and I've done prints, and I've sort of acted like Van Waring. I've sort of like, what does it feel like to make an 18th century etching? What does it feel like to draw all these chairs over and over again? And then the last part is making Van Waring. This is a whole section about the sort of act of, I took 2 or a number of his drawings, which were these sort of half drawings, where he had one design here and one design there. And he kind of Taco Bell and Pizza Hutted them, mushed them up together, right? And I said, we could do that on a CNC router. And I can make that now. I don't need to carve it. I don't need to polish it like cherry or walnut like they did in the 18th century. I can do it on the CNC. So the third part of the book will be about doing this exercise of sort of putting these 18th century ideas into the 21st century. All right. And then, because I wonder, should this be a book? Should it? Or should it be, maybe it's Netflix? podcast. I don't know. But I want to show you that I have these thoughts about whether it should even be a book so much that on my phone. Thank you.
Sorry. Down on the bottom. Yeah. There.
Okay, so welcome and thank you for the invitation to this panel. I'm honored to be here with my colleagues and collaborators, Annie Kogan and Alexa Griffith-Winton. And, thankful that so many students are in the room. It really is my favorite to talk to students. So my teaching, research, and praxis have been intertwined in exploring expanded boundaries of interior design. Beginning a tenure track university position and embarking on building a body of scholarly research after many years of practice caused a radical shift in my praxis. However, my practice was founded in sustainability and systems thinking, which readily transitioned from doing that to teaching and scholarship. Annie talked about writing when I started my tenure track position, not at Pratt, but at Arizona State University, which is a research one. They hired me and then they told me that they expected me to write a book, and I told them that they were crazy. I didn't write anything, not even greeting cards. I would make them. But I did find that what I was thinking and what I was researching in my practice was really translatable to writing. So if I could do it, anyone could do it. My early research into the prefabricated interior manifested in 2012 with the book Inside Prefab, the Ready-Made Interior. It had been generally assumed when the topic of this book arises that it's another volume on prefabricated architecture, but it is a reconsideration of prefabrication from the interior perspective. The research looks at furniture, kitchens, bathrooms, offices, wall systems, and the interiors of prefabricated houses. At the center of this work is the finding that the successes of the prefabricated interiors, a sustainable strategy that employs standardization and modularization, has positively impacted the development of systems thinking and prefabrication across the built environment. Yes, architecture needs us to further their ideas. The prefabricated interiors evidenced as typologies and territories. The typologies, forward. So the typologies, you see it again, of the screen, the module, and the unit are the basis for the prefabricated interior environment. I now define the prefabricated interior in 8 primary territories: soft structures in the built environment and on the body, furniture, the bathroom, the kitchen, the workspace, hierarchically significant interiors of prefabricated houses, and more recently, mobile interiors and the digital realm. An overarching result of using prefabricated elements is of particular interest in today's receptive climate toward sustainability. Building off-site has demonstrated reduced material waste and labor costs, while the fabrication of modular elements allows for adaptability, reuse, which increases the life of all the components. I expanded the bathroom research from Inside Prefab for my second book, The Prefab Bathroom in Architectural History, published in 2014. It is a book-length archicomic that examines 20th and 21st century design history through the lens of the prefabricated bathroom. The bathroom evolved to become the ideal prototype and testing site for systems thinking or systems theory, prefabrication, and sustainable technologies. Many significant designers and architects took on the logistical challenges of designing a prefabricated bathroom. As such, the history of design is addressed more broadly than the prefabricated bathroom alone. So textile technology and design, familiar name up there, which I co-edited with Alexa Griffith-Winton. We edited it together. We sort of proposed the theme. We wrote abstracts. We co-wrote the introduction. We wrote our own chapters. And it was kind of a confluence of our ideas about technology and textile coming together. So essentially, it's a book that's interdisciplinary, and the scholarship is from a wide range of contributors, including design practitioners, researchers, artists, scholars, and even aerospace engineers. Chapters examine the way in which textiles and technology, while seemingly distinct, continually inform each other through their persistent overlapping of interests and eventually coalesce in the practice of interior design. Addressing interiors from domestic to extreme, it examines a variety of critical aspects of the interior, including pattern and ornament, domestic technologies, craft, sound, and smart textiles. In my own chapter, I discuss the potential impact of digitally fabricated interiors, which through evolving technology can have textile-like qualities and extend the ability of a product to better fit an interior or more effectively perform. Interiors Beyond Architecture was published by Routledge in 2018 and was edited with Amy Campos from California College of the Arts. We co-authored a chapter, co-authored an introduction, wrote a couple of chapters on our own, and then we invited experts in the field to contribute to the volume. The book addresses interior design's impact beyond the inside of buildings, analyzing significant interiors that engage space beyond the disciplinary boundaries of architecture. The section Interiors Without Architecture includes the design for mobile interiors like those of a train, car, or boat, introduces a critical challenge to incorporate all necessary functions of design within extreme spatial constraints. The Autonomous Inside asks, how does inhabitable space dictate personal and social behavior? How do personal and social behaviors dictate inhabitable spaces? So in her chapter, Alexa Griffith-Winton analyzes the sets of several films and determines that in each of them, critical elements of the practice of interior design, independent of architecture, are used to create and support the narrative, the atmosphere, and the depiction of characters. Infrastructural interiors might exist within a structure that is not a building, within a building that was not constructed originally for human habitation, or as a networked interior that exists across buildings rather than as an isolated interior. So this is the chapter that I contributed to the volume. The third area of exploration is the hyper-interior, which investigates interiors that are extreme of another discipline and not interior at all. The designing of interiors beyond architecture provides opportunities to test strategies in extreme conditions that can later be applied to more typical scenarios. So I'm going to do this a couple of times. Shameless plug for interior provocations. A symposium founded by Pratt Institute faculty in the history of art and design and interior design departments, including Alexa Griffith-Winton. It provides a public forum for critical thinking about design theory and the history of the interior. 2 books have been published to date, and the third, On Edge, which includes a visual essay by Annie Kogan, is in press. So just a little bit about interior provocations, history, theory, and practice of autonomous interiors. This is the first book that we published. It addresses the broad cultural, historical, and theoretical implications of interiors beyond their conventionally defined architectural boundaries, with contributions from leading and emerging historians, theorists, and design practitioners The book is rooted in new scholarship that expands traditional relationships between architecture and interiors that reflects the latest theoretical developments in the fields of interior design, history, and practice. Appropriated Interiors uncovers the ways interiors participate explicitly and implicitly in embedded cultural and social values and explores timely emergent scholarship in the fields of interior design, history, theory, and practice. The volume includes 13 original essays and explores the tensions between normative interiors that express the dominant cultural values of a society and interiors that express new, changing, and even transgressive values. So yes, I did say a couple of times, I'm putting it. The website link is there. The QR code is there. Go to the website, you will find a link to Eventbrite. It's free. You just have to register. And it's in 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks? 3 weeks. 3 weeks. We encourage you to attend and share with your colleagues in cohort. We're pleased that NYIT will be represented this year as Francesca will be a poster presenter at the symposium. So I'm very excited that our network is crossing over more and more now with NYIT. Okay, so moving forward. I can't talk about writing without talking about making. I took out all of my own work today and I'm only showing student work because you guys are students. And I really do like to share how this kind of thinking is so important in the way that we make. And we make with our students all the time. They make without us too, but a lot of these projects are very collaborative. So following, I'll show several investigations that were developed in collaboration with students and that align with the prefabricated interior. My practice, research, and teaching have grown and informed each other through continued multi-layered work in sustainability and prefabrication, and student work has often been included in my scholarship, often. I just received a book today, what is it? Gregory Marinik's, it's the Urban Interiors.
Reader.
Yes. Interior urbanism theory reader. And it's like all student work. I'm so happy that it's my chapter is all student work. So I'm very happy that it's been put out there. So this is the project that was inside prefab. It's the S3 sustainable slotted system. It was a full studio built project. The parameters were meant to not only investigate prefabrication and sustainability, but also to explore the possibilities and potential of an all studio project. The Pratt Connect Lounge, this is the first one that we did, was designed by a team composed of faculty and students from the Department of Interior Design at Pratt. The studio was invited to propose and then design and build the lounge at the SOFA Art Fair in Chicago, 2013. The final proposal consists of 2 major elements, a seating scape and a canopy. They seek to create a connection between the SOFA visitors and the students of Pratt Institute. Imagery and plans from some of Chicago's most iconic designs were manipulated and abstracted to create a floral pattern. And the lounge seating is sheltered by white plastic trash bags. The trash bags reference the massive waste created by our society and the alternative possibilities to utilize that waste to create something positive, as with the fabrication of the seating from 300 discarded cardboard splatter tubes. So this project took up a lot of space, but it reduced down to something quite small. Everything was modular. The trash bags were inflatable and it all fit on one shipping pallet to go to Chicago. And that's the team. So this is called Plus Response. It was the Pratt Interior Design installation for the 2014 SOFA Art Fair. It's modular, packable, and broadly spatial. The Pratt Call Plus Response Lounge was conceptualized to heighten the experience of inhabitation by engaging SOFA visitors with the installation, the process of call and response, and inherent quality of jazz improvisation solos is critical to the design of the lounge and is represented with the balance of give and take. So essentially, this canopy is all modular that you saw. It's all laser cut paper. The students made patterns, designed them, and cut them on the laser cutter. They are connected with paper clips, which hung very nicely in the space. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. I'm trying to get back. There we go. So you can see they become quite spatial, but they pack up very small. We still had 1 shipping pallet when we did this installation. We had discarded felt from a manufacturer. There was weaving. There was the replacement of answering a question on a sticky note. If you answered a question that was etched onto the carpet, onto the floor, you could take one of those laser etched cards with you. We had a line like an hour long to get in at one point. And the space completely transformed from the beginning to the end. You saw that kind of white laser etched environment. And by the end, every panel that was reachable had at least one sticky note on it. The next year, I'm just going to talk about transportation a little bit. So the first 2 years we were given a pallet. The next 2 years that we did this, and I'm only showing one of those years because they're a little similar, but we no longer had a shipping pallet. So we had to design something that was spatial that we could fit into suitcases. So we came up with paper plus air. Paper was parametrically designed, but it was paper. So it folded and flat packed and it was cut in little pieces. And then air was inflatable. Just going to move forward in my notes. Sorry, I'm a note person. So the opportunity with inflatable structures is one that can speed up this process of moving through time to something that an observer can understand. So we were thinking about Chicago and the fire and how the city sort of went up, came down, went up, came down, went up again. So our inflatable was controlled, remote controlled, and we were raising it and lowering it as we saw people coming and going. So you can see it goes from kind of a flat nothingness that's all packed up in suitcases to an occupiable space. People were literally running across the Navy Pier and jumping on it. We did bring a repair kit with us, which we used often because it took a lot of abuse during this 4-day art fair. And this is how we got it from New York to Chicago. So this project is really recent. This is Landscape on Seascape. It's a modular system designed for the Ready Center barge in Red Hook, Brooklyn. It was about 2 years ago. The project was materially driven by elements that were available from Ready Center. So they gave us material and we built something from it. Our base material was shipping pallets and 4x4 posts. The modular system was derived from the dimensions of the pallets in relationship to the body. The pallets can be stacked and arrayed within and outside of the frame constructed with the 4x4 posts to form an adaptable occupiable landscape. Harbor waves, oh, sorry, we did that one. Moving ahead of me. So again, this is the team, and the idea is that you can create a landscape. The pieces stack, they are modular, they can form together, and they can be moved outside of this inhabitation to create an audience for a band to play inside of the inhabitation. So we're both inside and outside within this structure. So Harbor Waves, we finished it in December 2023. So it just got installed. I did meet the middle school people. This is for the Harbor Middle School, which is a new school in an old building in Red Hook, Brooklyn. So I met the Harbor School people through the Ready people. So remember, your relationship extend, as you can see, throughout your life. So maintain them well. So Harbor Waves is an all studio design build project for Harbor Middle School in Red Hook, Brooklyn. I said it was done in 2023. It's a wall system that mimics the dynamic and versatile nature of waves. It consists of planes that are in various shapes and forms to create dynamic storage, seating, and work surfaces. Project is designed for flat packing to be readily transportable from the site of fabrication to the site of installation. And also the old school is supposedly getting a new school in 5 years. So it's also designed so it can be deinstalled and relocated to the new location. And I'm very happy to share that Harbor Waves was made possible through funding from the Taconic Fellowship from Pratt Center. This is even more recent. We just installed this this February from the 7th to the 11th in Palm Springs. So this is another art fair. It's called the Intersect Art Fair. The students in a class that I teach, it's an elective. It's called the Prefabricated Interior Options Lab. Individually and collectively designed and fabricated a set of 30-inch by 72-inch interactive panels that come together to form a prefabricated, transportable, and habitable environment. The panels function individually, but the sum is greater than the parts. So this is my new research. It's, you know, it's a little aligned with Annie's research, except that it's wearable, but it's textile. I'm very, very excited about it. I'm writing a new book on the prefabricated interior that expands my original research. The first book Inside Prefab was a very small, fun coffee table book, very accessible. Now I'm writing the less accessible scholarly version that's much longer, much more global, rethought to current day, and also has more topics. So one of the topics that I've added is the wearable interior, and this is something that I explore a lot in my studios. So the wearables designed and fabricated by Pratt Interior Design students represent charrette investigations across multiple studios intended to develop program and design strategies for interiors. The studio topics include COVID dining environments with additional shared programs, the interior of Amtrak trains, and design for middle school classrooms. You saw the installation for middle school. So interior design is at the intersection of fashion and architecture. It is at once the reverse of the architectonic exterior and an extension of the body. The interior condition, unlike architecture, is typically customizable by the inhabitant and can be tailored, much like clothes, to the body. An inhabitable garment suggests a piece of clothing or attire designed to cover or adorn the body and provide functional inhabitation. So this one was designed for travel on an Amtrak train. It had like cushions and a desk, and it inflated and became more comfortable, storage, all sorts of things to make traveling in coach more comfortable. So this concept blurs the lines between fashion, architecture, and functionality. Garments that convert into spaces represent a critical intersection of fashion and interior design, blurring the lines between clothing and the shelter. So this proposal was for a COVID dining environment. The students were assigned to design a modular, movable COVID dining environment that also added program. In appreciation that we've appropriated public space and given it to restaurants. It's difficult to maintain, it's expensive, and there are other programs that could go there. So this student proposed that the space be shared with a thrift shop, and she designed a wearable garment that could transform into a changing room for that thrift shop. Throughout history, people have used cloaks and capes made from animal hides, woven fabrics, or other materials as a form of portable shelter. These garments provided protection against the rain, wind, cold, and weather. This project, again, was for a COVID dining environment. It was designed so that you could use the environment also as a park. So her environment was a park and a COVID dining environment. You could roll it out, lay on it, picnic with it. It had a lot of different modes: sleep in it, read in it. It became an enclosed environment. So in this one, this was just done 2 weeks ago. This was for the classroom, and the students were designing a wearable to make the experience in the classroom environment better, more useful. So she designed a system that could provide privacy. You can see if you look down to the third line, you could construct the modular elements as kind of a neck scarf that would keep you warm, but could also block your view and give you some privacy. It could be worn as a tool belt. It could carry your supplies. It could be worn across your body, and it could also be hung individually on the wall. So thinking about wearable interiors, they can manifest in garments that unfold into impromptu workspaces or shelters, catering to individuals who need flexible interior solutions. So this is pretty self-explanatory. It provides privacy. It's a garment. It can be rolled over to become a sleeping surface, and it also can be turned inside out to become a private work environment. And that is what I have to say.
Yes, come on. There we go.
Invite the speaker to please join us here. You can take a seat. Yes, yes.
Hello, hello.
Well, this is a very interesting conversation. I'm very happy to see some faculty and the dean joined us. Thank you so much for being here. It's pretty exciting to start this conversation with this esteemed educators, practitioners, researchers. I think one thing that stood out in these presentations was the relevance of research in your work and even in your pedagogical project, really. And that includes both design research and academic research, which connects also to the various registers that you use in the communication of your work. And I very much love the fact that we've seen very, very standard academic publications in today's presentations, but also comic strips and various artistic narrative experiments, which is a very fascinating subject. And I think also something else that connects your presentations is really an overall understanding of openness or expansion of the definition of what interior design is, which is very interesting because I personally come from an architecture background, and architecture for a long time has found a way to establish its autonomy as a discipline. Whereas we do have here in interior design a discipline that is expanding, whose boundaries aren't that defined, I don't want to say flirts, but anyways, engages with so many other typologies and artistic expressions. And I thank also the speakers for encouraging our students to do research. You see here precisely what's the power of research and how that can inform both historical research, theoretical research, but also your design. So I have two questions, and one deals with precisely this last point, and the other one is about books and publication of books, as the title of this symposium suggests. So the very first one emerges from a very interesting conversation I had when I defended my PhD with Lois Waintel. You might know her. Also, Penny Spark was there, and I was trying to make my to outline a more inclusive definition of what is a valuable design contribution in architectural history, and that's where interior design started to play a very important role. And I use that to study the work of overlooked figures in design. You all have engaged with the study of overlooked figures. You spoke about African Americans or Dorothy Liebes and so on and so forth. So that is definitely one of the outputs of expanding the inquiry, what's a valuable design contribution, but also Alexa, you speak about post-disciplinarity, multidisciplinarity is a must in interior design research across all scales. And that of course deals with the cultural dimension of interior. That was one of the things that came up in that discussion, or the importance of an habitation. So my question for you here is really how, what can architecture learn from interior design? Because we have, because of this expansion of the discipline towards other, not only other fields, but also towards other research methodologies. So I'm thinking about ethnography. It did not come up in today's conversation, but ethnography is so important in interior design. So once again, within this context of research methods, what can architects learn from interior design? And this is a question that is open to all of you. So whoever wishes to answer, that's it. Do you want me also to, well, maybe I can ask the second question afterwards. Is that fine with you? Fantastic.
Okay, so I already said that the most widespread successful prefabricated projects have been interior, and it's been the experimentation on rooms like the bathroom and the kitchen that has furthered architecture. But I'm going to go aside from that and say that the thinking about inhabitation rather than object in the city is a really critical difference between interior design and architecture. And I think that interior designers have a better appreciation that people occupy their spaces and they change over time, depending on, who's inhabiting it, or what, it might be the same inhabitant over 50 years and it changes for them, or it might be new inhabitants cycling through, every year, like in a dormitory. So I think architects can learn that actually making it more accessible for people to imprint on their environments and to change it is critical. It's not just that, perfect photograph that's empty or staged at the moment that it's complete. It's how it changes over time and learning to appreciate that.
Thank you.
So many feelings. I think, habitation is, I think we train designers to think body. We had not one, but two of the kind of, and Deborah's work is always about the wearable to the interior. So I think we kind of feel almost like a dancer. I think you kind of operate from the kinetic body first. And then I think another thing that brings me to measurement and scale, and that we don't lose track of scale. And we kind of have to constantly be measuring and get the kind of the intimacy of the interior is really our touchstone. And I'm always, we have a lot of architects come into our department, and the first thing I'll realize is they never draw furniture and they never draw potties. It makes me crazy because you never know how big anything is. And so how can you assess a space if you don't know? You kind of know, like, how big is a toilet? It's about 38 inches from front. So you just, that kind of triggering and kind of knowledge of your measurement to the space measurement. And I think I would love to make everything feel. Yeah.
I just want to build on to both comments, because I think particularly with my students, I'm teaching furniture design studio, and today we did a one-to-one experiment, and we drew the furnitures one-to-one, and many ones was like, oh, this is not the distance I was calculating. And so the training of an interior designer with the idea of scale and body and relationship of the body. Yeah, exactly. How like they were asking, but it's 18, height should be fine, but okay, there are the standards, but you as a designer need to have that feel of, is 18 okay? Or is it 18 inclusive? Is it 18 inches? Make all these questions that have to do in relationship to the body and the design. No, the body and the design. I think it's great. And I particularly enjoy the book that now changing about the topic of the autonomy of interior design. I think for us, for the classes, we always think about this, about, again, the atmosphere you mentioned, or the haptic experiences, like the how do we create this in drawings, in the design, in the thinking. I'm not a writer, but like I teach the studio, so I reflect on like the work could be written about, but it always needs to be something that we make. And I think interior designers are great makers, and I appreciate the variety that you brought today to the lecture, because we saw so many things, and we saw how we could get inspiration from many, many things. And I will, take that lesson and tell the students to take that lesson, that whether it's film, whether it's set design, furniture, fashion, even architecture, we need to be aware of all and use that for your own creativity. So thank you for bringing this up. I have another question.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, we spoke about publications. We spoke about books. We started to have a conversation about the open or expanding definition of interior design, what it is, and its disciplinary position, of course. So I was wondering how the creation and publication of a book, the use of different registers. So once again, both academic research, specific research methodologies, engagement with various theories and disciplines. I'm thinking about psychoanalysis, I'm thinking about anthropology, I'm thinking about critical theory and philosophy, but also the use of illustrated work, the publication of students' work. So how those things, or whether those things help consolidating the definition of interior design as either an autonomous or an open discipline, and how much of that has been instrumental in the development of your pedagogic practice. And we've seen some very obvious examples, of course, but maybe you can speak a little bit more about that. I think Alexa has not answered. Maybe Alexa, you want to start?
In terms of just like in terms of the pedagogy, or like what aspect? I have like a very checkered past when it comes to publication. I can tell many stories.
Book publications, the definition of interior design, history and theory, and pedagogy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so important. It's so important. And there's so much really interesting research coming out every year on the interior from many different lenses and perspectives. And it's really, really exciting. So I think it is very important. And, you know, I think the diversity and variety of those things is really a testament to the strength of interiors as a site of inquiry. You know, I think we have the canon in architecture, and it's useful, and you know, I think it is a scaffold, but I also love that the interior resists a canon, and I think that that tension is really interesting. And when you are publishing, that is something to take into account, not only in terms of like conceptually, but also just like the mechanics of publishing and how do you place your book and all of that, which is like another conversation. But absolutely, you know, I think the more of these, you know, really great rigorous publications that come out, it just shows what a rich field interiors is.
And let me add, your one of your essays, Inhabited Space, Critical Theories of Domestic Interior, that's a must in my history and theory courses. And what you've shown us today, you know, with engagement with film theory or design, general objects, preservation, you've been, I see overlaps here with, not only within the context of relationship between art, interior design and fashion and textiles, but also in terms of the attention you pay to the time of interiors, really, and history, not only the traditional interior, let's say, or interior room sets exhibited in museums. It is about objects and the time of interiors, which is so different from that of architecture. And I always try to stress that in my classes. So maybe you want to say a little bit about that and how that was included in your publications, and whether you are dealing with that in your in your teaching or in your museum, your practice, let's say.
What to think a little bit. These.
I think I'm going to be answering a different question than the one that was posed. No.
Go ahead.
So I would just like to say, I mean, we talked a little about theoretical underpinnings and how this affects your writing and your teaching, perhaps how they converge. I would just like to say that writing about design, I think, has made me think about design far more critically. And I believe the same is for everyone. And I would also like to say that if I can write about design, anybody can write about design. It was just like I said, it was my weakness. I was a math and art person. I wanted nothing to do with writing. But forcing myself to learn to write later in life and actually learn all of the things that are part of a scholarly volume that I somehow managed to not take in as an undergraduate or graduate student, like a review of literature, establishing a theoretical framework, these things that I had to look up because they needed to be part of my writing, I realized made me a stronger thinker, a stronger designer, a better teacher, and having my students think about these things makes them better at what they do. So I encourage you to really look at the theories. A lot of them come from sociology or psychology, but they're rethought in terms often first of architecture, but then also for the interior. There's so much scholarship coming out right now, and it's all accessible through, I'm going to guess, through your library. We have many of the volumes in our library. A lot of them are ebooks. Take it in. But the other thing to think about is this research is really new, and you are still like at the forefront of it. So your voices can be heard to add to this discipline. So I really encourage you to really read some of these articles. They are things that you're interested in, things that you care about. I'm sure you're reading them for class, but keep up with the new writing, because it's so amazing the way people are thinking and pushing the boundary forward.
And it's a very accessible discipline. Like, I think architecture, and one of the reasons we like mad at architecture bad, but it's because the discipline interiors needs to be accessible, because real live people are in interiors. Therefore, the writing is accessible and more digestible and more potent to how you are in the world. So I think it's just a body of knowledge that's incredibly exciting, because it's meant to be for you. It's meant to say things out loud and to make you make better space, which sometimes may be the kind of cool architectural stuff. Like maybe I don't know. I don't want to say mean things, but I think that's sort of exciting to me, that you can always open up one of these interior provocations and go, oh, I've never thought about, a rug that became a wall, that became a ceiling, that, oh, it was all transparent. So there's always sort of magical things in these volumes.
Just thank you so much. You actually answered the question. Sort of satisfied my curiosity towards that. And you've spoken about accessibility, and we spoke about the fact that the discipline is in constant flux. One of the presentations was about that, or spoke about that, and the fact that there's so much still to be written, which is such an important thing. And I think it gives students also a sense of agency, and I think it's very important. So discipline is in constant flux, constant formation. There's always new things to learn, and new figures to discover, either if they exist or they don't, whether they've published or they have not. So I think we can definitely use that, unless Florencia has another question. Maybe we can.
I think I just have comments. Yeah. So one thing I wanted to say, building on the previous conversation, is that writing is part of design, and more now with AI. So when students think about design and what they want to do, or what kind of space they want to do, or what description of your design ideas, I think language is very important. And I think actually I learned this at Pratt, where when I taught there, they had a writing class tied with the studio. So they were promoting the language as a way of operating in your design. And I would say that a richer process that way will be if you have also a background of reading and descriptions of spaces, description of projects, materials, ideas. I think that in general, we are not writers somehow by nature, but we need to tame that, so that using it. Yeah.
When you're doing prompts, like every word sort of It means your imagination is growing the drawing. It's like really, have you guys played with this?
Have you
Like,
played
do
with
it.
AI yet?
Mid-journey, fun. And so that's another thing. That means that you have to be articulate about spaces. You need to have read a lot about spaces to make it even better. Because you don't want to, you don't want to make an AI drawing about something you've already seen. That's called Pinterest. Okay, so then you got to move into the extraordinary with like extra, more words, more imagination.
That was my comment. That's great.
Wonderful. I think this is, a great time to open it up to the students, the audience. Anyone has any question that they want to ask to our speakers, even from the online people that are following us on Zoom. Oh, yes, we do have one over there.
Don't be shocked.
Hello. Thank you guys for all speaking. I wanted to know if anyone on the panel can speak to the concept of neuroaesthetics. In my own research, I've found that it seems like it's emerging. It's probably all just existed and maybe a new word has been tagged to it, but I feel as though there are some schools that are focusing on neuroaesthetics as a major. Johns Hopkins is also doing a lot of work within this field. And I guess the spirit of the work is sort of to take what could be intuitive and to scientifically prove that design is important. And so they're courting some of the big tech companies. And when design is included as typically an architect, that's, involved in the multidisciplinary project. And so I guess a couple of questions. Can you guys speak to your own research around this topic? And I guess as someone who's more, into interior design, how can we be at the forefront of those type of conversations and be leading them given just our own study and bodies of work and things of that nature?
I don't know if I am I'm not sure if I know exactly what neuroaesthetics is, but one thing that I do think is really interesting right now is there has been a real return to the consideration that, our emotions and our physical being are one and the same. And it's really interesting if you look at, say, there's some early 20th century sanatoriums that were meant for people to go to when they were, overstimulated or, basically like in a traumatic state and needing to retreat. There was a lot of philosophy about the interior and how that can build up health mentally and physically again. And then, of course, all of that was discarded and, hospitals really forgot about like the body and what it's like to be in those spaces. And, now it's very much coming back to the awareness that, that we are these sentient beings that are also in these kind of animal bodies, and that all of that is really important. And so I think that is something that's really interesting and really, I'm really looking forward to seeing how that develops, because now we have a lot more science to inform, but it's very much, opening this door again of the idea that, and there are places in, Sweden has a whole series of research projects that have resulted in hospitals that are all designed around your experience and health from an experiential point of view and not like a medical diagnosis point of view.
And then the second part of your question, I think, was about how you can get to research. And I want to be all of us have jobs and are working under the university, but most of us started our research outside of universities or museums or things like that. Like research is a Saturday. Research is a Friday after. Like I stopped doing any Pratt work on Friday at 1, and I just do my stuff, my thinking. So I think that one of our responsibilities as young designers at this juncture, because we're at a juncture that's incredibly exciting, is to develop, even if you're like undergrads, like start your own research agenda. Because that's how you move through the world. That's how you get information. So I'm excited to see your work.
I think it's also important to note that your research agenda is what you're interested in,
Yeah,
right? So if
yeah.
there's something you're interested in and you keep putting this in your projects, that's the beginning of your research. So what I didn't realize when I suddenly was meant to write books was that I realized that my practice was in sustainability, right? I knew that. And that was sort of what I was told by the people who hired me who thought I could write books. Like, you already have a research agenda. You've been researching and designing with sustainability for, X number of years now. But what they didn't realize and what I didn't realize, and I wrote about sustainability, and it's not that I'm not excited about it. It's just, it wasn't, it's part of what I do, but it really wasn't like the really interesting part of what I was doing. And I realized in looking back at what I was doing was that I was working in systems from the time that I started my practice. I was using slotted steel. I was using dimensionality of materials. I was using studs and their spacing, all sorts of things that had to do with systems and really prefabrication in a component system. And that was what I was excited about. And sustainability was a part of that. It was part of what I was doing, but it sounds like you're excited about this. So this is your research, but I'm sure that all of you have things that you're investigating in your projects that if you really look at them through like a more specific lens, you'll realize, wait, I do have a research agenda that's my own, that I can move forward.
Do you guys do a thesis?
I do on the 4th year.
I mean, my thesis advisor, and it's completely true, is like your thesis is the beginning of your lifelong and I'm doing this
And better.
drawing, and it's always yellow and and so that's a really great kind of touchstone too. I mean, some people can just ditch their thesis and move on, but that's the beginning of your way of being in the world.
Well, these are very precious suggestions. And is there any other question?
You guys were great on it.
Well, if not, I think these are very amazing words, and this conversation really encouraging. Hopefully you will be inspired by them and by this conversation. So thanks so much to our guests.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks to you.
Thank
God.
you. It was fun.